Hi, Drake.
Hello.
I appreciate being on today. I appreciate you making the time for me to come on and talk to Drake. I know that there's a lot of things that you have to discuss, and I'm very interested right now in kind of getting to some things that are concerns that have been filtered through me and through our network regarding specifically the paperwork that has been filed and an interest that people have in, at this point, maybe being able to see that. Can you maybe respond to that right now?
Yes, I can respond to that in a couple of different ways.
Okay. Hi, Drake.
First of all,
good to meet you.
What?
I said it's good to meet you. Good to speak with you.
Oh, good to meet you too. Okay. Let's see here. How can I preface this correctly? We have supposedly made blank copies of the paperwork without signatures available through one of our people that was handling the paperwork, and I don't know, Deatra, do you feel comfortable with requests for that come through you, or how do you want to do that?
Yeah. Actually, no. What's happened is we have had one state has graciously offered to redact names so as to protect those individuals, and we will be placing those documents in image form on our website, and hopefully they will be available by tonight. Our webmaster is currently out, but when I spoke with him this morning, that was the top of his priority list for the website. It will have its own little button and everything else, so it'll be very easy for people to find.
Okay, great.
Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, it goes a long way right now towards... I know that you've done a lot of interviews, and I understand that we're dealing with a media where everybody gets to have their say, and sometimes that's a bit of a problem from the standpoint of somebody who's bringing out a message. People have opinions, and people tend to be rather cynical about the work that you're doing. And that is kind of filtered out in ways that I think have maybe made it more difficult to get the message out. And I understand your position in terms of protecting the people that signed the documents, and at the same time, and I expressed this through our mutual contacts, that I felt anything you could do to make those publicly available and visible gives a great deal of credibility to what you're trying to do right now, Drake.
I appreciate that too. I've had a lot of requests in varying different ways, both on shows and via forwarded emails requesting something. And so far, that wasn't available. Now that it's going to be, my next step is that I've requested official documentation of some sort from the people I deal with. So okay. We'll find that out hopefully in a day or so.
My line of questioning about the documents, and this really was the top of the things that I wanted to talk about, is that maybe it would be good to for the people to understand the process itself and what that entailed, and why, for instance, when you file documents into a court, these documents are documents of record. Therefore, there is an assumption, and I'll put it that way, that these documents would be publicly available or available in a way that would be verifiable. In other words, a paper trail.
No. That's another aspect of this. If you don't have the code numbers, you don't have access, just that simple. Now, what you have to understand, or what people don't understand, is that this was simply a notification process. However, within the paperwork itself, there is a complete divorcement from the present corporate government and governmental structure, any of their affiliates and any of their assigns, superiors, etc. In other words, we have divorced ourselves totally from what is going on. Now, in that process, one of the things that was done was that the paperwork itself declares our freedom, just like the Declaration of Independence. Through that, if people would bother to read it, it states that a government that becomes repressive and that the people can't live with any longer is allowed to be, as a duty by the citizens, replaced. That's basically what this is about.
Okay.
And the simplicity of it, I know, is difficult for some people to get their head around. However, the basic civilian authority for the military to back us up has been given through that declaration, that notification process, and the documents used. The documents are the 1787 Constitution, the Article of Confederation, the Bill of Rights, and that beautiful thing called the Declaration of Independence. Those are our base documents. Okay?
Okay. Now, understanding that and understanding that what you just described is a simple process that gets back to roots and origins, at the same time, what we have experienced in the over 250 years since has been a long succession of court rulings, adhesion documents, and basically a process that transferred citizenship from that original constitutional construct, I guess maybe even going into the period of the 13th Amendment. How does this impact contracts that have made between states in terms of, let's say, federal funding, which are, in fact, adhesion contracts that give the federal corporate government entree into the affairs and business of the several states?
Well, basically, the thing is that we have reverted back to those founding documents as they are and as they are only. So we have what is called a regressive legal position back to those documents and nothing after holding any validity. So basically we're starting over similarly to what was first put together in terms of the structure, and circumventing any and all of any of the agreements, executive orders, laws, rules, regulations, you name it. So this notification steps outside of any challenge or anything of that nature that deals with present day law, because common law is mentioned, among other things. It is an extraordinary difference, and it's hard for people to understand at times that a notification can have such impact. However, the manner in which this was put together is such that it does so. So what you're looking at is stepping outside of or independence of the corporate governance. Secondly, the other part of this is that the corporate governance being ruled by the banking system, and that banking system, already having been leaned, is in a position where it has to repay everything that is borrowed, stolen, leveraged, etc., over the years. So the premise of this is twofold at this point. First, you have the Declaration, and that is a separate project from everything else. I want that to be perfectly clear. A lot of people like to give it a name. A lot of people like to run it into other things. That's not possible. There are basically four of these actions, separate entities each. Now, the second part of it is a localization effort. What people don't understand is that this so-called house cleaning is not going to come much below, if at all below, the governor level in a state. So everybody that is in a state needs to start looking at their governmental structure, figure out who the crooks are, so that they can be removed from a local standpoint. Now, secondary part of all this is that most of all of the power that you'll find wielded by everybody, this is nationally here, nationally in other countries, and internationally, is financial. That financial system is being set to be taken down to zero. The secondary part of that same zeroing out is what's called RV, or revaluation. You're going to go from a debt instrument orientation to an equity instrument orientation in terms of currency. This is a big world of difference. This is going to adjust and affect a lot of things. It will not adversely affect anything other than people will be able to, for the first time in 200 years or so, feel a financial as well as real freedom. In terms of the legalistics, I've already mentioned common law, the basis of which is simple. If you have an injured party, if you do not have an injured party or damaged property, there is no crime. That does not mean that if you act stupid, somebody won't slap you in the slammer in the cooler until you sober up or whatever the problem might be. That is also still available. However, you're not looking at years down the road. You're not looking at your car being towed and this sort of thing unless absolutely necessary. In other words, you're going back to the way it was in the 50s, to coin a phrase and to give an outlook. Okay, the other part of this is morality. Nobody can legislate morality. But there's a cute little saying and phrase that covers it pretty much, and it's called the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So between the two of those, real freedom and understanding you're responsible for what you do. You can't just go off and do everything you felt like you always wanted to do, because some of it might harm somebody. Then people understand the responsibility that goes along with the freedom being given. So that's pretty much the combination that you're looking at this point.
Okay. I want to back up a little bit on this, because you said that pretty much, I guess, arrests or suspension of offices would not occur much below the governor level, and I understand that given Freedom Reigns County projects and what you've talked about on prior shows. What about state legislatures? What happens to elected officials now seated in state legislatures?
Well, if they're crooks, they need to be taken out and introduced to the FEMA camps. They vote for us.
Would they, for instance, have the ability to override the decisions, or let's say the decision's probably a bad word, to override the documents that have been filed? In other words, is it possible that they're going to assert legislative authority or even potentially judicial authority through the courts in order to attempt to override this?
Well, the interesting part about that is no, they cannot. You have to remember, this is not, the notification process is purely a notification process. However, the statements that are included with that also stipulate that we revert in governance back to those days. If you go back to 1800 as an example, you might want to note that most of the things that we deal with now didn't exist. Okay, the premise is that if they were not extant at that point, they have no impact today. Now you have to remember, the military does support this effort. I refer to a thing called the plan, and these things and items and actions are included therein. They do not want anybody to get the crazy idea that there's going to be martial law or that this is a military coup. So the only way to do that is for the people to declare their freedom, thus giving them the civilian authority to act by the will of the people towards freedom. The adjudications in terms of what actually happens to the individuals, you've got the military, federal marshals, local law enforcement. The local law enforcement is going to be backed up by a combination of the federal marshals and the military as needs. In other words, if you got 1,000 people, the local sheriff with five deputies is going to have a problem getting all the cuffs on them. So you have people to stand in and help. Pretty simple. The authority, though, comes from the people. The authorization and civil authority comes from the people, and with the military's assistance, puts this thing in a different perspective than what has happened before. I mean, in the beginning, at the first of this Declaration of Independence, we didn't have an army. I mean, you got a bunch of farmers with shotguns at best. That was an extraordinary problem, as I understand it. You got a lot of snipers, this sort of thing. But you did not have people who were organized and in a position to actually accommodate what needed to be done. In this case, the ideology, of the plan is, first of all, an orderly function, a lawful function, and a peaceable one. In other words, they don't want a bunch of nuts with guns running around shooting at people.
Okay.
That's not what this is about. This is simply a direct, lawful replacement of, quote, and I'm quoting, the crooks. Now, this is the reason for the importance and critical actions known as the localization. The people have to look at their local government. If that's a county, fine. If it's sparsely populated, that may be even better. It might be easier to spot somebody that's crooked. But this goes down to the mayor of small towns, city councils, things of that nature. All of these have to be done by the people. The only portion of this that is to be addressed by the action itself is primarily the federal government and its assistants. In other words, the governors, possibly, and up. So a legislature that is of a state is going to have to be in a position to be looked at very closely in order to determine if somebody has taken a bribe. I mean, did the guy go in there at base pay and all of a sudden he's a multimillionaire? If so, then there's some crooked dealings going on, and that can be legalized crooked dealings. The idea recently came up of the instant trades and things of this nature. They say they're not guilty, and therefore it's law. Well, just because somebody says so does not necessarily mean that that's the truth. So these are the things that there's a lot that goes into this. Go ahead.
Okay. Chain of command. We're talking about a military that I assume is activated under these documents being the will of the people. The first actions will be what? Will they be military in nature, or will we see a mobilization of military, or is this going to be background in terms of public perception?
They're trying to keep this background. You're liable to see some troops show up at different places, but only as support. It is not a military action. I don't know if you're familiar with posse comitatus.
Yes.
The field manuals and the United States Code of Military Justice stipulates that the military is not to engage civilians in this country, period. Now, there are some exceptions to that where somebody might push somebody around a little bit with a baton. They might be in riot gear, that sort of thing. Other than that, no. If someone offers an armed offensive, then shame on them. This is why I've been trying to express, don't engage the military. That the military, the majority of the police forces, are on our side this time. That's a big, and I mean a huge difference between what has transpired elsewhere and before. So what you got to remember is, first of all, I did an addressment of the troops. That thing went like wildfire through the troops. Now, I'm talking about your average enlisted person. It went to then it started up the chain of command on my recommendation in that same show. What you want to do is you want to ask your commander, you intend to follow what we got here. And right now, 99% are saying yes. So you're looking at something that is agreeable to the Joint Chiefs, the Pentagon, etc. Now, what is not openly easily stated is that there will be some civilian appointments. This has to be. And these are temporary and limited in power. This is something that everybody has trouble getting their head around. You're going to need a commander-in-chief for the simple fact that commander-in-chief has to deal with illegal and unlawful and unconstitutional executive orders, treaties, agreements, etc. And there is a load of them, believe me. So then, you have the other adjudications and decisions. Now, 99% of everything is going to be left up to we the people in terms of it's going to be 24/7 voting. It's going to have to be that way. We have a lot of decisions to make. There are also a couple of large groups of constitutionalists, and by this I mean experts in the Constitution, active constitutional judges, lawyers, and experts, etc., who are looking at how to structure things from that 1787 Constitution in such a manner that this problem we're dealing with today can never happen again. So what you're looking at is most of the federal government going by the wayside. You're looking at an extreme and extraordinary difference in state government. A lot of this stuff is unnecessary. You got EPA, you got this, you got that. Why does, somebody need a drug enforcement officer? Well, I understand what's going on. Very simply, the people that are doing these things obviously have not been attended to. That needs to change. What's the morality? Well, what's the legality? And you go from there. I mean, it is a very complicated thing that's being dealt with.
Okay, let me ask you this. Given what I've been told by whistleblowers and insiders, we know that what we call the military-industrial complex has been very interwoven with each other. Corporate interests have bled into the military for decades now, certainly since post-World War II period. I would think at this point the military would need, if the Joint Chiefs, if the Pentagon are on line with this, there would also have to be a purging within the Pentagon and within the ranks to ferret out the people whose interests lie in this military-industrial complex. We're talking tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars that feed this monster in Washington, D.C. I live near Washington, D.C., and I can tell you that the bedroom communities of Washington, D.C. are feathered by federal dollars that feed this directly.
That's true. Now, what you have to understand is that the fun and games started back around the Korean War. And that fun and games was fostered primarily by corporate interests. And I'll explain that very simply. The more munitions and personnel required by either side of a conflict, when you back both sides, the more you make.
Right.
So, in that light, what happened back then started this, basically. And that was that the United Nations was telling the communists exactly our troop strength, our locations, how many tanks, how many personnel, where we were going, troop movements, etc. Now, I would like to know why the UN, being a treasonous entity, is still on our soil. That would be my first question. Well, excuse me, some of these insiders, people that I've found that do know what's going on, have stated they would love to put a bunch of bulldozers down there and shove it off in the water to see if it floats.
Yes, I understand that.
Anybody that might be inside.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they feel about it. Now, whether they'll do that or not, that's questionable. But there is a strict divorcement in two ways. First of all, they do not like the idea of some corporate or politician telling them what to do. They do not like the idea of foreign entities being in charge when it should be us in charge. They do not like the idea that they have to beg for monies. These things are all in process to be addressed. And that's part of the structure of what is happening. Okay?
Okay, so assuming that the military itself is lined up with all of this, it goes back to what I had asked you earlier. In terms of chain of command, the initiation of the operation itself and the authority to initiate it, which is obviously, as you've stated, Drake, coming from the paperwork that has been filed. But within the chain of command, there has to be a top-down situation. That's how armies and military operations run. Where does the initiation of authority begin in an operation where the commander-in-chief, being ostensibly that person who occupies the White House, would be in charge?
My understanding of the agreement that was partially laid out to me is that this will be, first of all, everything will be made public, so everybody knows. Number two, the agreement is that the commander-in-chief, who probably will be appointed, and this will be temporary for a specific period with limited power, okay? If the man gets the job done before then he's free to go. He's done with the office, if he so wishes. If the people like the job he's done, as he's been in there, they can keep him. That's the people's decision, and therein lies the 24/7 voting. Now, the military is willing to acquiesce certain portions of control to that appointed commander-in-chief. There is a short list that the Joint Chiefs would like to see as best capable individuals to handle that office. That office is going to be tasked with helping straighten out the mess, realigning a whole bunch of departments, doing away with a lot of them, and all that sort of thing. So there is going to be an extraordinary freedom movement just from the White House alone. And you have to remember, this person has limited powers. If need be, and any kind of attempt to adversely exercise those powers is made, that person is immediately removed, taken into custody, and he goes visit FEMA camp somewhere. They're not going to put up with any fun and games. And I personally am in accord with this for two reasons. First of all, it puts a person who is a civilian in the position. Number two, people who know what's going on, and there are several that I do know who do know what's going on, will not cause problems in terms of what the stipulation of returning to freedom entails. They will facilitate that. And that's basically what that office will be busy with, probably, I'm going to estimate at least 3 months, probably longer than that. So, does that answer the question, or you need more?
If I understand what you just said, Drake, the first publicly visible evidence of this action will then be the removal of the present sitting Chief Executive Officer, Barack Obama.
Along with a bunch of others.
Okay. All right. It goes to my next area of inquiry, which has to do with, right now, the work that you're doing. And, I have to say you've been very vigorous in this, and I think, for the most part, you've been very clear and upfront in answering questions. We are dealing with perceptions being formed on what I call the 1% level. In other words, right now, the freedom movement, as we know it, exists in a microcosm on the internet and different freedom groups, obviously, that are sort of hidden from public view. The average person watching CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC has no clue as to what we're talking about. If they were to walk into this conversation right now, they would swear that we were on hallucinogenic drugs. So my question is, how do the groups that are working together out there shape these perceptions in a way to make them palpable to Joe Sixpack?
Okay, very simply. I'll give you a real good example. On several occasions, some of the shows where I was interviewed exceeded the watching, let's see here, what would you call it, the audience numbers of Fox News, CNN, and others. So if we are exceeding their numbers, that means people are not watching as, you know, the persona of Joe Sixpack sitting on the couch watching whatever. What's happened is people are deciding, well, maybe there's something to this. I'll listen to see what it says. And that's basically what's happening. There are a multitude right now, and I mean a humongous number of people who are newbies. And by that I mean somebody who has just found out that there might be another way to do things that would be a lot better. That's where we come in terms of offering this to the public. I was asked to do several of the shows, given specific instructions as to what to address if I could, and to either run by the cuff, make notes, however I wanted to do it. The idea of that is to, first of all, as an example, I addressed the troops. That went like wildfire all over the planet. The morning after, okay? I mean, the morning after that show had been completed and the recording put on the website, it had turned up in Japan, Subic Bay. It was going through all of the sailors. It was going through all the Marines. It was going everywhere. This is great. That means everybody is aware to look in their field manual to see that they're not supposed to take on civilians here in our country. So then I was tasked with addressing the general public to include militias and underground groups. That particular show was one of the better ones and garnered extraordinary numbers. It almost doubled what Fox News and CNN normally do. Now, if people don't want to look at it, they can find this online. There's been reports lately that Fox News, CNN, and other types of news channels have lost somewhere between 30 and 50 or 60% of their viewership. People are tired of not having any news, okay? They're also hungry to write their lives. In other words, they understand that there's some kind of funky monkey business going on, and they don't like it. The only thing they see are tax increases, gas prices that go out of sight for no good reason, among other things. And they're tired of it. How can we fix this? Well, part of what this will do is to address all of those issues. Now, I'll give you an example real quick of international fun and games. Everybody hears about Iran and Israel. Ooh, they want to kill each other and kill each other off the face of the earth. Well, yes. Okay, well, there's a little bit of a funny caveat to that. And Veterans Today is a website that I read because I know one of the editors. And it's interesting that if somebody takes a look, and it's online, you can find it, but you got to look a little bit. Israel and Iran use a trading platform. Most people don't know what one of those is. But this is where you trade.
Iran set up a bourse many years ago for trading. Yes. Okay.
Guess who are partners? Not just trading, but partners in the ownership of that platform. Iran and Israel. Well, let's see here. As soon as Iran started making funny noises about, we're going to blow you up, the oil price started going up. Well, if they're trading oil on that platform, it sounds to me like they're in it for the bucks. It sounds to me like that World War III stuff is just bogus BS so that they can make $2 extra a gallon or whatever they're getting. So you have to bear these things in mind. The basis of all this is something that looks like one thing when it's totally something else. You have to remember that the bad guys have been limited in their funding to a point where they have primarily threats. Look at that, NDAA. Oh, my goodness, an executive order that just sticks it to us. Well, I'm going to tell you that this, to me, this is a horse and pony show and not much more because they have lost their capability to be consumer-oriented. Now, this is something everybody's familiar with. Everybody's a consumer. Well, the problem is that the banking system is also consumer-oriented. If they cannot go to a small country, rape and pillage it, and leave everybody sitting in the dust, and take all that new funding and run it through their system, they got problems. And if you guys want to see a real problem, I'll give you an example. one very major bank here in the United States is very close to full absolute bankruptcy. It's called Bank of America. Now, you want to see that? It's online. There's 15 different listings for the problems. They're looking at a combination of closing 600 branches to start with, and they're up to the point of actually offering to split it up to the highest bidder. Now, if that doesn't tell you something, if the liens on the federal banking system doesn't get the message across, you've got in excess of 600 resignations and arrests and whatnot in Europe. And those started when our package of papers left our shores.
Let me ask you this. How did they know those papers had reached The Hague at that time?
It wasn't at The Hague. It left our shores. Okay. They tried to intercept it. They was watching, but they're not as good as they think they are. I run across this all the time. Forethought and planning does not have anything to do with hurry up and wait, but it's they're just the same. The word back in World War II was snafu. You fill in the letters.
Snafu very well. My father was a Korean War veteran, yes.
Okay, so when you have a snafu situation, that means that the idiots that are shooting artillery have just, and you're sitting in Vietnam or somewhere, have just bombarded the crap out of you. Everybody's hiding in the bottom of their foxhole praying, and you're on the radio, and you're going, what the F was that, man? What's the matter with you people? Well, that is a snafu situation. Right now, the banking system has an extraordinary problem. They have stolen, leveraged, or borrowed monies that they were not lawfully or legally entitled to. And what is happening is that they are being required, not asked, required to pay it back. So the central bank system doesn't have 30, 40 trillion laying around that is real money. So they got some serious problems. And you're seeing this first in Europe. The reason you are is because Rothschild is a large conglomerate of financial institutions. And he had to be hit first. Okay, Rockefeller and the Bushes here are the next prime target. So you're going to start seeing actions that are just unbelievable. When countries, and they've already had 2 or 3 go broke, when they go along with whatever the central banking system or Fed has in mind, say, no, we're not paying a fraudulent debt to you. You have Iceland. And then they turn around and they say to the banks, you have perpetrated a fraud on the people through your idea of mortgaging. That's illegal. You can't do it that way. So they forgave all the mortgages. Now, what does the bank do at this point? I would be hiding in the basement or trying to catch a quick flight to somewhere else, which is one of the things that's been happening all over the planet. But there's no place to hide. Everybody is on the bandwagon to say no. Now, something people don't know, and I'm going to add this in here real quick we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 other countries interested in following the procedure that we used. Now, their documentation and the structure of things may be slightly different, but the process is valid, it's real, and it's available. And they are chomping at the bit trying to get our attention and say, oh my goodness, please help us with this. We want to do that. So this is not apparently something that was just going to be here. Apparently we started something that's going worldwide.
Let me ask you,
it's called freedom.
Let me ask you this in relation to that. Our northern and southern borders right now, Canada and Mexico, given coalitions that have been forged mainly through military alliances in NATO, are we concerned about troops that can possibly be mustered against this current effort from outside the country, specifically on our northern and southern borders, military assets that may not be amenable to the plan as you've outlined it?
No. And there's several reasons for that. Even though there are cooperative agreements, as you mentioned, there are limitations on those cooperative agreements. At one point or another, you have a certain limitation When that limitation is crossed, and there's several types of limitations, then it becomes an invasion. Now, the other part of this is that I'm going to suggest, and I don't know if the man's done writing it yet, but a friend of mine, David Wilcock, is supposed to offer a new piece entitled "Divine Intervention." Yes. Now, I can give you one example that I'm aware of that I checked and found to be valid. They had a couple of battalions of opposing troops online, rifles pointed. The command was given to fire, and the only thing that was heard was clickety click click. Not a bullet went off. Now, I'm sorry, anybody that's any gambler out there, you can look up odds, and I'll guarantee you, they don't have odds that are that big. The number, you don't have a calculator that will handle that number. That is not possible. So, you have, in my estimation, what would be called divine intervention. Now, that's supposed to be the name of this piece. There's a lot of documented evidence that David's going to present in that piece that basically shows where tanks won't start. You go to try to make something work, like our ballistic missile system. You punch all the buttons you want.
Yes, David Wilcock.
Now, I don't know how they...
Yeah, David Wilcock has actually outlined some of this on his blog that I've read as well. Maybe I'll just, at this point, insert this for you to comment on. I have an article posted by a whistleblower, a former defense contractor named John Kettler. And John Kettler has posted onto his blog the following: ETs, EDs, spooks, Drake and the planet. It says that you are being protected by extraterrestrial and extra-dimensionals. And I know that's wild for some people who are mainstream and maybe don't delve in this area, but this article from John Kettler is actually very supportive of you, and Kettler is in contact with what we will just call off-planet beings. Would you care to comment on that?
Well, pretty simply this. I have a couple of blog sites that come through on various different news outlets that I listen to, and a couple of those reference galactic councils and people of this nature, beings of light and all this. Basically what I did was, somebody had been complaining about chemtrails, and I thought it was time something should be done. So I mentioned to ET that it might be a good idea, if they want to really be friends and show their good intentions, to maybe start taking care of some of these problems in ways that nobody else can. And what was really funny about that was that the following day I got a report in an email that this guy saw some sort of a, quote, flying device following a chemtrail plane. And it was gobbling up the chemtrail. Well, apparently it got tired of the taste or didn't like the way it smelled or whatever. It fires this little ball of energy at it, at the airplane. And the airplane starts smoking. Well, that's okay, but it's still putting out the chemtrail. So the turkey fires again. The plane can't handle the second burst of energy, whatever it does to it. I don't know if that's electrical or what it might be. I have no idea. But the airplane basically went down. At the point where the airplane went down, this thing went over and at low altitude, hovered for a few minutes, and then disappeared. Just as ET craft seems to do. They like to go zip, and they just take off so fast you can't follow them. They disappear. That's and this is a report that could be totally bogus. I don't know. What I'm saying is that it is this sort of thing that encourages me that there may be this ET, let's call them angels.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
So I cannot dispute that it's there, having heard these kind of reports. I mean, you cannot have a whole battalion of tanks that don't start. That doesn't work. It does not happen that way. Those are astronomical odds. So, take it for what it's worth and think about it. I mean, how funny would it be? And I'll give an example. There's an old movie. It's an old sci-fi flick. It's called The Day the Earth Stood Still. And the only thing he did was turn electricity off for about 10 minutes. So, if those ideas were available back then, I imagine ET probably could do that if he really wanted to today. If there is such an ET, I haven't met one yet, and I'm looking forward to that if they ever decide to land in the yard.
That goes to my next question along this line, and it is quite simply, is disclosure part of this? Are we going to, as a result of what we've initiated, now begin to see visible intervention by off-worlders, angels, spirit beings, whatever you want to call them?
My understanding is that we are supposed to. The intervention will be selective, as I understand it, and will not be extraordinarily highly publicized until after they introduce themselves. Then the remaining of that supposed thing you're supposed to be doing by making us into the same thing they are comes about.
Okay, I want.
Does that cover that?
That's very cool. Thank you. A couple of questions that I have that were posted onto my blog. Is it possible that the mass arrests planned by the network have been surveilled by CIA time travel or remote viewing?
I know it has. I've been in touch with a couple of people that initiated those programs, and one of the things, you can look this up on David's website, David Wilcock, Divine Cosmos, is called Operation Looking Glass. This gives you a view, or did at the time that it was active, into the future, so that they knew who would be president, so they knew what to do about it. They knew what was going to happen in the stock market or this or that, and knew what to do about it. So apparently this is real, from everything that I can deduce. What you have to remember is this. The first evidences of ETs that we could put our hands on started back in the 30s. A lot of people ain't aware of this. They know about the crash at Roswell in 48, but they don't know about the ones earlier. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to reverse engineer something. Just an average electrician can do these things. They're not as complicated as people like to think. So what you've got is, think about the extraordinary collection of different types of really far out technologies, things that we only dream about or put in sci-fi movies, actually being real. Now, I want you to think about, they had a thing called the Lost Ark, and Indiana Jones lost it in a big warehouse full of all kinds of that sort of stuff. Well, that should give some people some idea as to what is real. These warehouses are not, that wasn't phony. It wasn't the movie, I mean, but the actual warehouses exist. Now, as far as new governmental, the idea is to be fully transparent in everything that is done. If there's anything that affects the people of the country involved, those people have to okay the idea, whatever it is. Now, that, I think, is a pretty cool idea. This actually gives Joe, whoever, wherever, at whatever level, a say. You actually have a government by and for the people at that point. And transparency, all the secrets, guess what? The laundry's going to get done. So, we're talking about several things. One is that I have heard they're going to have a learning channel, and that learning channel is going to repeat certain things. Okay? There's supposed to be an informative channel that gives overviews of the next section to give an idea so you can prepare your mind. Then they go back to the secondary thing, and you learn about that technology. Now, these are extraordinary technologies. These are things that you saw on Star Trek. People don't understand that has been available for years. So, these are things to bear in mind.
Okay. One last question that I have posted to my blog, asked by a listener. By what authority or right does Drake consider it acceptable for Americans to arrest citizens of other countries in other countries? Are you suggesting this course of action, and do you think that these criminals, quote, will be arrested?
Well, first of all, yes. 99% of the criminals will get popped or arrested or whatever you want to call it. Basically, countries are going to try to clean up their own messes. If we have information that needs to be sent to Interpol so that they can go get somebody in outer Slobovia somewhere, that information will be transmitted to the correct people. The interesting part about this is that it will be affected on a local level primarily. And you'll remember I stated localization is important. It's very critical because only at certain levels do you find open crooks. The banks openly steal from you legally. Well, having something that's legal does not make it lawful. So
right.
all that's due to change. So what you've got is you've got bankers specifically or criminals. Now, you have to understand the difference between what we've got in the way of basic hyperbole, BS, conspiracy theory, propagated by our government. The war on drugs. That is horse hockey. Another one is the war on terror. Another case of horse hockey. The funny fact, and I hope there's a lot of listeners with a little bit of legal expertise. If you can look, you'll find that very shortly after 9/11, suddenly we had this extraordinarily, I guess it weighs several pounds, document called Homeland Security. Well, I think it's kind of interesting that those thousands of pages, very concisely written, could all of a sudden mysteriously appear. This deals with the people who used a thing called ALEC, and people are going to look that up. And ALEC produced that paperwork before the event ever even happened. I put out on the internet that proof that George Bush knew about it 6 months in advance. There were official communiques from several of these countries that happened to believe that we might not need to have something of that nature happen, that sent official communiques now, okay? And several of these came out. They are posted on some of these 9/11 objectors' websites. You can take a look at them. I mean, when you get one, you don't necessarily, well, where'd you get the info? And they check it out. You get 3 or 4 of them, it's time to pay attention. And I would suggest that Bush knew about it. The reason I say that is because I know who was party to him and the action. So, like I say, there's people that are retired that are going to be arrested for crimes they've committed. A financial crime is one thing, but when you kill 1 million people, that person needs to be executed, in my opinion, slowly, but executed nevertheless. As I understand it, the idea of being nice in terms of executions is going to go by the wayside. These people are not going to be executed nicely. It could be firing a squad. It could be hanging. There's a variety of different ways. Electric chair. These things are going to come back. We might even use the guillotines that they sent over here in the boxcars for us. I don't know yet. That hasn't been stipulated. I know I was an interrogation officer in Vietnam. I can make a hardcore communist agent talk, and I didn't even have to damage the person. So this will give you an idea as to my understanding about psychological operations.
Yes.
I would love to get a hold of some of these people and interrogate them personally. I think it would be enjoyable.
Absolutely. Okay, we talked about the UN. What about NATO? NATO is probably the longest standing treaty organization that we presently have in place, and from that emanated a lot of the other treaties that have been handed down over the years. It is my understanding that a treaty signed by a sitting U.S. president is a binding document incumbent upon the American people, and that is, in fact, even in the Constitution. What happens to NATO? What happens to the treaties that have been drawn up in alignment with NATO and other organizations related to our military operations overseas?
Okay, basically, in that particular aspect, the president has to be signator to a document sent to each one of the treaty agreements or parties. First of all. Secondly, by executive order, rescind the treaty. And thirdly, break all relations, to include diplomatic if necessary, relations with these countries that would be involved in that specific treaty. Now, this may be done in a formality matter where the ambassadors and people don't go anywhere. They just sit there for a few minutes, and we get a communique. We would like to reestablish relations with your country diplomatically, and you okay that and send it back. Then you have the diplomatic relationship restored without the treaty. That's basically how you rescind the treaty.
Okay. What about the National Security Act of 1947?
Trash.
Okay.
Trash. The administration with it, TSA along with it, IRS along with it. A lot of alphabet agencies that are not going to exist any longer.
Okay. What about alliances made with Israel and the Zionist state over there, and the Zionist alliances that have been made here in the United States, including billions of dollars of funding that have gone out into Israel? And I'm going to join this to it as well, the liberation of Gaza.
Okay. I've gotten involved in that problem between the Palestinians and Israel to the extent that I actually was able to get a 2-week peace in place, just because I didn't like the idea. I went to war, and I don't think it's a good deal. In terms of Zionism, I would go on the online and punch in Zionist communist, and you'll find that the same organization that Hitler dealt with in getting rid of the Jews, but I mean sending them out of his country, is still in place and very active. Now, as far as any influence upon what goes on in this country, any organization, group, or individual who decides that they don't want to take action that's adverse to our founding documents, if they don't have a home country, they need to pick one. If that country will not accept them, then they get life. Just that simple.
Okay. Because you obviously know that anything that goes against our present stance, official or unofficial, with Israel is going to piss off millions of evangelical Christians. I'm just pointing that out based on my research and based on what I know about that entire movement. I've done a lot of research into Zionism over the years.
Okay. There's a problem with religiosity and the splits and the animosities between different kinds. Okay? If somebody will take the time and the trouble to go back into time as far as you can get, you're going to end up at the cuneiform tablets by the ancient Sumerians. This is approximately 8000 BC. In that documentation, you will find that they refer to what they call ancient documents. Now, the ancient documentation generally spans millions of years. That's the general consensus of the meaning of it. And it was at one point a singular belief system. So the basis of this is how this works very simply is that each person who does bother to go to church picks the one that they're most comfortable with. How many different kinds of Christian churches are there? Or Catholic churches, or Methodist churches, or etc. What I'm saying is that each individual believes in a personal way as far as God goes. Whether you have documentation or not is not the point. The point is that these things will be clarified now, not through the actions of this of our efforts. This is outside of our efforts. This is another portion of things that are supposedly coming. The The difference being that, at the very least, a Muslim on his prayer mat can worship right next to a Christian paying homage to the Christ on the cross without animosity.
Yes.
I want everybody to think about that, because in each one of the belief systems, you'll find that those heathens, as it's stated in one book, infidels, as it's stated in another, if they cannot be converted, are to be eliminated. Now, where'd they come up with that? The basis is that if you create strife, you also create profit. That's the idea. This is where white and black have a problem. This is where Latino and other people have problems. There are simple, very simple, commonsensical answers to 99% of all the BS that goes on. When somebody's cut, they generally bleed the same color, irrespective as to what color their skin might be. It makes a little difference. It comes out red, period.
That's right.
So you are a part of the human race. Now, our planet ain't the biggest thing going in the galaxy. It's not actually considered very large at all. With the population we've got, it might be a good idea not to worry so much about cultural difference and this one's better than that, or this is better for me, or any of that, but worry about how to simply apply the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, I've had dealings. I grew up in the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King had barbecues in my backyard. I used to get painted black on the way home from school because I was a white boy. You name it. In varying ways, I've had a lot of the experiences that other people weren't privy to. The idea that I could, and people knew me and liked me, several of them, when I was coming up in grade school, and they couldn't understand how a white guy could like a black guy. Well, we were friends. We had grown up. His house right on the other side of the tracks from me, and yeah, it was a railroad track, and what did he do about being on the other side of the tracks? We became friends. And the way we became friends was my grandfather had an orchard, and I told the man to go ahead and get him some fruit. He said, thanks. He went and picked some pears and some apples, and when he was climbing down the tree with this bag full of fruit, Grandpa comes out and says, what is he doing in my orchard? I said, I told him he could. What did you do that for? His family would like to have some fresh fruit, and they can't afford it. My grandpa looked rather consternated that I had invited a black person onto his property, for one thing, because he was prejudiced. And then the other part was that I might have a serious problem liking black people. But so that he didn't create immediate problems, my friend, by this time, of course, was standing on the ground, standing there wondering if he ought to hand me the bag or run or what. I said, go ahead, man, don't worry about it. It's took care of. And so he started to leave, and my grandfather said, I need to talk to you. And we had a long talk about some of these things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, you know, you name it. I mean, this is a very personal basis.
Yes.
And it goes on from there. And if people take the time and trouble to do their own homework, 99% of the things that they have questions about can be found. Now, my suggestion is that they look to published takes on ideas, and then look for documentation that deals specifically with that. This will weed out a lot of the places that you don't want to go. It'll cut down your time considerably. So there's that. Okay.
I wanted to ask you too, Drake, and you may have addressed this in previous shows. I think I've heard most of your interviews, but not all of them. There are allegedly artificial intelligence satellite systems in low orbit over our country and theoretically over the planet as well as underground bases, much like we see out in the Southwest. These bases have been documented for many years as being hives for what I guess we would call negative off-planet entities. your current military contacts being high up enough are aware of these? Are these being addressed as well as part of the proactive ramp up to the action?
First of all, the action has to be able not to be interfered with, so yes. Now, the other part of that is that these anti-human entities also are not nice to the angels that are supposed to be helping us. So they were at odds to begin with. I heard about 3-4 weeks ago that there was a little bit of a dogfight, and we don't have to worry about the bad guys in terms of aliens any longer. The ones that survived headed to unknown places at very high rates of speed. As far as underground bases, those are being taken out. Now, at first, there was a couple of accidents. One was in Denver and one was in Virginia. There were explosions involved in that, and the idea, as I understand it, is not to be destructive and not to take life or injure people. So they have another aspect, supposedly, and I've heard several reports from several people, and these are only reports. I don't have a video. I wish I did. I would love to have something that had the look on their faces when these things supposedly happen. Apparently, they can create, these are the angels, a vortex.
Yes.
And they can suck everything out of a place. Furniture, people, whatever. And I understood there was a whole lot of cussing going on, and that the description was, and this is without the swear words, that these tree-hugging hippies from space needed to quit interfering and abide by their prime directive of non-interference. What's the matter with you? And off he goes. And that was the report I got. Comical, yeah. Believable, take a guess. If somebody would like to believe that this is possible, fine. If not, and you got the capability to travel, I suggest you go to some of these underground bases. Because what you're going to find is that the door's standing open and there ain't nothing inside. Whoops.
Yeah.
And as you said, the Southwest is loaded with them. People can find them fairly easily if they go down there. So, if somebody can travel, like I say, there's quite a bunch of things that not only are going on, but have already taken place. Go see for yourself. There ain't nothing wrong with it. You won't find any guards. And like I said, the door's going to be open. You can look around if you want. I don't know if anybody's ever seen blast doors, kind of like a big bank vault door, only it's made out of special reflective metals. So, I have been privy to know of a lot of this simply because of my dealings with the nuclear defense of this country. That offered me high security clearances and a bunch of other things. I had sensitive information, and they weren't sure if I was going to let that out or not, and I never said a word. So they felt these people in these sensitive positions or high levels thought they could trust me. And that's the only excuse I've got for this, other than the fact that they asked me to make broadcasts.
Okay. One of the things that I'd like you to refine a little bit in your narrative is the perception that you've basically told people to sit back and watch TV, that they don't have to do anything. Now, and I understand that's a misperception, but maybe for the record here you can refine that communication a little bit.
Okay. Being able to sit, we've got enough problems with Joe Sixpack on the couch, or however you want to look at this. It can be Joe the it don't matter. The problem is this, and it's called awareness. If people don't understand that there is a problem in terms of the government coming out with regulations day after day telling you you cannot grow your own food, and I'm serious about this, that you cannot have a garden, that you cannot pick the food that you eat, even though you might want to at the grocery, telling you that if you have a weed that they consider noxious and they don't like it, they can take your property and or fine you exorbitant amounts and things of this nature. If they don't think that's a problem, then go back to sleep. However, for all of those who think that might be a problem, or that the government has become too invasive in your life, I would suggest that you start localizing. And the way you do that is you ask around the people that you know. Now, there's a problem with that. How many people know their neighbors? If you don't, you're slacking. Get off your whatever and go talk to the neighbors. Hey, I live next door. How's it going? And go from there. See where it leads. Eventually, you'll get around to the point of several things. Growing your garden, as an example. Whether somebody likes it or not, okay. If a federal agent comes up and says, I'm going to plow up your garden, you're not allowed to do that, and it's just you, that's sort of a even Steven kind of thing. But when a neighbor, or maybe two or three, show up with their shotguns and say, we don't think so, that changes things. Now, I'll give an example of this. Ruidoso, New Mexico, had a standoff with the federal government. The sheriff asked for support. The local militia showed up with 130-some people, and the 15 feds decided it was time to go eat lunch somewhere. They have not been back, and none of the things that they said were going to transpire happened. So there's a lot of us and a few of them. There's varying ways to handle this. Generally, and I'm saying generally, right now, the power base has been extraordinarily eroded. This is something everybody has to understand. Just like the mafia used to be able to reach out and make people a deal they couldn't refuse, the supposed bad guys here in this country can do the same. There's a problem with that. You got to be able to pay the guy to go do it. And they're running out of money, and their money's been limited, and they owe it to somebody. So everybody is trying to figure out what to do next. Do that question again, and I'll give another take on it.
No, you answered it. You basically went to the place where I wanted to go, which was mobilizing locally and being proactive, because people have a tendency in a time of change to feel helpless. I watched this with 9/11. I watched as people stood by and became depressed or angry, seeing what happened with 9/11. And how do we connect with those who are part of local networks that maybe are part of the loop that you're currently in? How do we identify people? Is there a way to do that organizationally?
Well, first of all, you get 2 or 3 people together, you start talking about it. You talk to somebody that lives, say, 5, 6, 8 miles away, and get them to do the same. I have been in touch with a majority of militias and underground groups as far as my reach goes. And I would suggest U.S. militia, if somebody wants to see if there's a militia group in their area, and there's varying other ones. You can put militia in and do a search for your state. A lot of the times you'll find that militia doesn't exist anymore. The gun club does. Okay, what's happened in varying states is that at one point the bad guys got scared. So they did major sweeps in different states and took out a whole load of people that were not doing anything wrong at all. The Hootery group was just recently exonerated of any and all crimes because the FBI stooge that they stuck in there was the guy with the plan showing them how to make explosives. He was also the guy who was telling them that they should go blow up government buildings, maybe shoot a politician. So you have to remember that these things eventually are beginning to actually come out and come out correctly. So, and it was Michigan, I believe, a Hootery group. You've got these people all over the place who have political clubs, and they may not be anything near what you might think they are. It could be it could be a book club. You don't know. So you have to search it out. First, I'm going to emphasize, do the neighbor routine. You may bump into the commander of the local militia. You don't know. So, and the only way to find out is to show that you're a patriot and show that you believe that, there's some problems we need to address, and has he got any ideas about it? Or don't get into politics. Well, you talk to some of these hillbillies, rednecks,
yes.
People that deal with it on a real basis. And if you see the word government politics, generally they turn red, blood vessels pop out, and they say things that you wouldn't say anywhere around the church. And that's their opinion. Okay, then you ask them, well, would you like to try to do something about that? Oh, I got something for them. Tell them to come on through my front door. Well, that is not as such the correct answer. The correct answer is to, okay, I know how you feel. You told me about that. I got a question. Can all of us get together here in the neighborhood, maybe have a barbecue and talk about maybe buddying up, making sure that everybody's got something to eat if something did happen? I mean, it wouldn't take but one really good earthquake, and all the bridges on the Mississippi could go. You know, and if you're on the wrong side of the river, you might have a problem. Or if somebody needs something, you know, maybe you could, you know, somebody has something that they need, or can do something for them, or exchange services. I mean, a lot of different ways, as many as there are fingerprints on people. So, but the localization, in terms of the importance of it, is astronomical. And the reason I'm saying this is that in order to clean up a state, each of the individuals in that state need to take a hands-on approach and figure out who's the good guys, who's the bad guys, and who they might want to see taking over that office or being the person who would give a town or a county direction. I mean, you don't got to be, super educated. You don't have to be a rocket scientist in terms of brains. All you got to be is honest. And if you can find a person that's honest enough that it's painful to be around them, that's your candidate.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. You talked about elections, and I want to ask you a couple of things about specifically voting rights acts, the necessity of showing certain types of documentation at a polling place. Right now, you basically can't vote unless you are registered. And the registration process for that is in itself an adhesion contract under the current voting laws, which stem basically back to the 14th Amendment. The voting process that you are envisioning, how will that operate in terms of who may vote and where they would vote?
Okay. If somebody's voted before, they're grandfathered in, and I don't care who don't like it. That is the law. If somebody wants to challenge somebody on that, then they have to prove that they didn't vote when they did, and they have their signature. So you can create a real serious problem for the fun and games that the intended control legislation, regulation, etc. provides.
Follow up to that.
I think it's a good idea.
Follow up to that is simply this. You take a person like me, I do not vote at the current time because I will not sign voter registration forms or join a political party. I have not voted in 11 years in any major elections, and my name officially would have rolled off of voter registration rolls many years ago.
Well, that's not altogether true, because somewhere you have a record that shows that you voted. It might be microfilm and squirreled away somewhere, but I did some checking, and I'm on record as voting from the state I came from, and that was quite a few years ago. Now, as far as a registration, okay, here is the concept as I understand it. That is that you either have voted in the last election, as an example. In your case, you have not. If you've got a utility bill, it's got your address on it, and you're willing to sign to vote, and I'm not saying join anything or agree to anything other than the fact that it tests that you have voted today, would that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the next layer of
Okay. Now you understand about free and honest and open elections with paper ballots. It's very simple. You fill out a ballot and you sign it, sucker. Done. No big deal. The only proof that you need that you live in the area and you're voting in the right place is your address on the utility bill, as an example. It's no big deal. This has been done. This has been the standard practice for years. One of the things they're doing with ID validation is to bring a utility bill and a picture ID with you, basically. And, You can have a picture ID, and it's got your picture and your name, address, and that's it.
Yeah.
There you are. And it agrees with the utility
So
bill.
effectively, a Costco card would work. Okay.
Yeah, if it's got your picture on it.
That goes into the area of birth certificates and the straw man and what happens as we move into this system. Is part of this process going to be a redemption on the straw man accounts?
Okay, what you're dealing with is a take, and I mean a take, on what are called the collateral global accounts. In other words, they are illegally leveraging money out of the global settlement accounts through that system. What has to be understood is that that system is not lawful. It is unconstitutional. You cannot have two entities being one and the same. It don't work. One of the basic physical lessons I learned was that you can't have two things in the same place at the same time or it explodes. So the alternative to that is dealing with people's normal signature, their normal persona, the real person. Now, I don't mind the idea of a birth certificate validating the date you were born. I don't think that's, extraordinary. However, take that little red number off there, or blue number, or the yellow watermark that stipulates that you are securitized and creates the straw man. Let's do away with the gobbledygook. This would be a part of doing the dishes in terms of house cleaning. So you're talking about take everything that you know, everything you're familiar with, and divide by common law. That in and of itself either equals zero, in which case that whatever you're dealing with is valid, or it negates it if you get anything other than zero. You have to understand that linguistics and laws are mathematical. And in the mathematical state, 1 minus 1 equals 0. That is a validation, or what's called a proof. And the proof is divide by 0, or subtract it from what you see. And if there's anything left over, whatever you're dealing with is not valid. The Constitution, I believe it is, states that anything that is found to be contrary to the Constitution is to be stricken as if it never existed, and that anything that has been adjudicated by it or through it is to be rectified. Now, that rectification might cost these banks even more money. So, you're talking about, as an example, people being stripped. And we're dealing right now with what would be known as monarchy law in terms of the straw man, the basis being the LIBOR and the Bar Association, among others, that are tied directly to the old-fashioned monarchy in England. Yes. Seems they owe us some cash, among other things, and an apology.
Okay.
Yeah,
I believe it does, Drake. Thank you. You had mentioned earlier in other interviews about the Pope being deposed or stepping down, and this goes into sort of an international scale in terms of taking down the Vatican, not the Catholic Church, but the Vatican itself, which is very much a monarchy and a power structure within itself, which has ties within North America, mainly through Jesuits who very early in the history of the country made heavy incursions into our social structure and our governmental structure. Can you tell me the impact of this in terms of taking apart the Vatican power structure and taking apart the Jesuit influence as well?
Both of those, along with varying political arms of different religious groups, will have a choice. Leave or live in a FEMA camp. Pretty simple. Now, as far as the Vatican itself, it's got some serious problems. One of the reasons the Pope is resigning is because of the...
pedophilia.
Well, yeah, you can call it that. I'm going to some a little
well,
different. That's not the only crime. So the controversy that deals with what's going on and what has happened, okay, is the main reason given. I would accept that, because the problem is that the Pope is going to be prosecuted just like some of these other politicians and bankers for crimes. Now, how many crimes? Okay, well, figure out how many thousands of people have been injured, and you understand the severity of the crime. I'm going to tell you that some crimes, and it varies, are worse than others. As far as considering a sin, something that is bad, something as small as a little white lie, or as large as slow intentional murder, are all considered just basically sin. Sin is the thing where you go against the morality provided by God. This is contained within the Golden Rule. So, I'm not sure about some of how that will come out. What I am sure of is that the more severe the crime in terms of numbers, in terms of the reasons, will dictate whether or not these people are executed. I've seen some things that when I was in Vietnam specifically that pretty much ruined me, messed up my head thoroughly. I doubt I'll ever get over what I saw. These things are going on now, and it's not a war zone. Now, I can understand getting nasty in a war zone to an extent. This was above and beyond that'll ever come close to it. With some of the things that are being done, and this will come out shortly, in terms of service to a church, an individual, or supposedly using God's name to take money, or whatever you might want to call these transgressions, is to me unconscionable. You do not, period, you do not go out of your way to crush the head of innocence. You do not cause babies pain just because you think it's funny to hear them holler and things of this nature. There are some things that just are not done. There used to be codes of honor. Honor among thieves was one of the things that went by the wayside pretty quick. It used to be that I got your back and you got mine in combat. All of a sudden you come home and you find out you got to watch your back and the front at the same time. You think the war is over, and then they start in on you. First thing they do is tell you you don't have benefits. And I'm talking about a guy that lost both his legs. Remember the reference that Obama made? Well, they went voluntarily. Maybe they ought to pay for their own expenses. Dude, you ought to have both your ears slowly removed for remarks like that. And it goes on and on. I mean, to me, there are limitations. And these people have gone way past what any kind of limitation I can think of. Some of the things I'd like to do to them are not something I can do because I happen to believe that I'm not supposed to do that.
Yes.
And I'm not going to lower myself to their level because of what they did.
So
I leave it alone.
That goes to another area as well. Would we, for instance, see, I guess, what you would call a South African style of councils, truth and reconciliation that would occur to reconcile some of both the institutional and individual liabilities, let us say, regarding these high crimes against humanity?
I will suggest that there will be that and more. First, you've got the plain old everyday adjudication, and that puts that person within a custody situation. And then, if there are further crimes, or if that one didn't bad enough to execute them, I would suggest any crimes against humanity in general probably would be. So, as I said, I think there's going to be I'd say a fairly large number of executions. And people that not only have sold their soul, but profited from that sale, if you look into their eyes, you're going to see a dark place. Yeah. And these are the tombstones of their own being. And when you got that, and it is not the 1,000-yard stare where somebody's in awe of what they've experienced. This is the person who created that 1,000-yard stare by their actions. There are several people in there that are still currently around. If you look into their eyes when they're on TV, you're going to see a blank spot, and you'll understand at that point.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Have you, at this point, had an indication that at some level the group that you represent, have penetrated mainstream media in some way, that you have what are potentially media defectors who will be key access points as this program breaks out?
Well, first of all, I want to dispel something. We're not a group. We're free-thinking individuals.
I understand that.
Okay. There's no organization. And without a leader and no place to go, that reduces the targets. That's why the signed information is not forthcoming. Okay. In terms of breaching into mainstream media, that is just now beginning. Some of the efforts are being objected to by a certain, quote, mainstream media. Now, these are the higher levels of alternative media, such as this show and others. So, yes, it's beginning, but no, it hasn't quite reached there yet. When you see a blank interview by a 3 or 4 way phone call, and you hear my name on Fox or something of that nature, then you'll know that mainstream has been breached. Now, the last word I got was that CBS had broken from the cabal. And I looked at their news not too long ago, and they're actually reporting something for a change. They're not getting real in depth, but it's actually something other than who hit John gunfight that took place in Florida where a kid got killed. And I've heard 17 different stories about that. The kid was beating the guy to death. Well, you hit him with a gun. You don't shoot him necessarily. You hit him upside the head hard enough, he'll quit. If it's an older guy and he's security, he should announce himself as such and simply, hey, who are you? Oh, I'm such and such. So you got any ID? No. Well, that kind of makes me wonder what you're doing here. Okay. The guy says, well, I'm a guest of somebody's. I says, were you headed that way now? Yeah. You care if I walk along so I can, see that you are actually a guest? No, man, come on. And you walk over to the dude's house, and everything comes out peaceably. Now you understand the difference between law enforcement, the idea of you plug them, we plant them, kill them all and let God sort them out, the mentality of pull the trigger and don't worry about it, changes to one of protect and serve, a peace officer. All you do is make sure everything's cool. And sometimes you walk somebody home, a big deal. You waste a few steps and everything comes out fine. But this is something that I have been real adamant about with all of these armed groups and militias. Do not be quick to pull the trigger. Find out what's going on first. Don't be stupid. You're liable to find yourself in a problem worse than what you think. Now, in that particular case, if that kid was beating this guy and beating him badly, and he's an older person, then it's easy for someone with the strength of a younger person to do permanent harm to an older one. So if that were the case, then shooting would be justified. Killing is not. You can shoot people in places that make them quit, guarantee you. And everybody probably has an idea where the bullet might need to go. Instead of taking a life, to me that would be the best of the worst case scenario. I took a lot of prisoners when I was in Vietnam instead of killing people. I felt a lot better about it. I don't like killing people, but every once in a while, when somebody pulls their gun on you, and you got yours leveled at them, you got a choice. Then you have a choice, him or me. And I always decided me, and I'm still here. So, for whatever reason. And then, the outlook, the aspect, the difference is going to be extraordinary. The lives we've lived to this point are due to come through some major changes. And we should start, as I said, on the local level as much as possible, contacting the local sheriff, letting him know that he's got backup. I mean, that's going to give the guy a big, whoo, I don't have to worry about a militia coming after me. Good. You mean you actually want to have, yeah, cool. You can lighten their loads. You become a part of the police auxiliary, even as a militia member, and you would be escorting prisoners via transportation while somebody could be on patrol. So when Granny might have somebody trying to break in her house, that officer might be close enough to go take care of that problem, this sort of thing. So this is the kind of community effort that's necessary. Hopefully that covers all of it.
Yeah, I don't know how much time we have left, or if Dietra needs to come in. If you have updates that you need to do or anything, I don't want to step on any of the remaining time that is left. I have a...
No, we're okay. If you have one or two more questions, we've got about 6 minutes.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to make sure that I gave you room to do what you had to do, Dietra.
No, it's okay, because we can catch up on anything on Sunday.
Thank you. And you've been very gracious. And Drake, you too. I appreciate you withstanding my barrage of questions here. I've been fielding them for about 10 days on my website and emails and all over the place. I think a lot of what you've kind of talked about is based on a perception of morality in this country that I hope still exists. Or a renewal of that morality. Maybe as we throw off these leaders, we see a restoration of what we would call, in the best way, the spirit of America. I know a lot of people are cynical. I tend to be somewhat cynical as well about the character and nature of the people in this country. And probably the biggest underlying question that I've had all along is, are we deserving of being free, given that we allowed ourselves to go this far down this road, to lose our country, to lose our rights, to lose our freedoms, and to lose our humanity to a large degree? There's a question.
I think we are. Yeah, I think we are. I think that a lot of people need to just simply wake up to the fact. Now, you got to remember, Slick Willie got in here a long time ago. It started with the bankers dealing with our first pop out of the box. We had debts and we couldn't pay them, and so it was required of us to do certain things. That basically set the precedent for the rest of it. It started back, George Washington made the first executive order, so to speak, with the federal districting. Later you had reparations with the South. You had people, officers, under the command of a person, placed in the seats of elected officials and told to vote a certain way. There's a lot of things that have been done that are not right. And so this supposedly will clean that mess up. And what we do with it from there, as Franklin said, what have you given us?
If we can keep it. That's probably the biggest question of all. Do you plan, and we began this interview by me asking you about the release of the documents, and I know that that's forthcoming. As this ramps up, do you have a program in place to be as persuasive as you can, given that you have to maintain the safety and security of the people who are doing the work in the background? In other words, provide scoffers, cynics with something that will kind of win them over to the side before they really have hard evidence in front of them?
Well, there's several things. You can look at the present situation. You can look at the fact that the 12 central banks were leaned. I'm working on a request to officials to offer some form of official document that doesn't give things away, but yet shows the validity of what I'm saying. At the same time, as these things get ready to happen, behind the scenes there's going to be the sweep. Then over about a 3-day period, 2 days used maybe, to make sure that their sweep's complete, they've got the records and the individuals, we will be given a heads up. And that heads up is called green light. Green light means that we get on every news station available to man and out this thing, basically through the internet. At the end of that point, I understand that they're supposed to be, at that time, the public arrests. Now, by public, I mean that they're intending to invite the press. So, I'm looking for that day, that news day. That ought to be really memorable. And to add to this, to be a part of the rebirth of a nation is totally awesome. I never expected this much involvement. I didn't expect to be on the radio, much less doing what I'm doing. So I'm grateful to those people who trust me to that extent. And hopefully, we can continue this process until we get her done.
Absolutely. I think that was my last question. I think you, like I said earlier, have been very generous with your time and answered things to the best of your ability right now. So I don't really have anything else at this point to ask. We kind of, for the listeners out there, what I did was I took the questions, a lot of them were aggregated into standard questions that I had, and also Drake answered a lot of the questions. If you go back and you listen and then listen again, because a lot of times we don't hear things, you will hear answers to your questions and you will hear answers to questions that you've not yet asked. And I would just encourage people at this juncture to please do that and to please hold off the cynicism. Be skeptical.